You're fired, and honestly, it's a relief. I've been carrying your dead weight for 2 years. Those were the last words my boss said to me before security escorted me out of the building with my belongings in a cardboard box. What she didn't know was that my phone had been recording the entire conversation, and that wasn't even the recording that would destroy her. My name is Sloane Whitaker. I'm 31 years old. And 4 months ago, I watched a woman steal my entire life's work, collect a $5 million bonus for it, and then have me thrown out like garbage. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole career. People stop being careful around you. They say things they shouldn't. They forget you're in the room. They assume you're too beaten down to fight back. They assume wrong. Let me take you back to where this all started. Not the firing, that was just the end of one story, and the beginning of another. I mean the real beginning. The moment I walked into Vantage Technologies as a bright-eyed, 24-year-old software engineer who actually believed that hard work and talent would be rewarded. God, I was naive. Vantage Technologies was a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas, specializing in enterprise software solutions. When I joined in 2017, the company was doing well, not spectacular, but stable. We had about 400 employees, solid contracts with several Fortune 500 companies, and a reputation for reliable, if uninspiring, products. I was hired into the product development division, reporting to a senior engineer named Marcus Webb. Marcus was old school, 50-something, had been with the company for 15 years, believed in mentorship and collaboration. He saw something in me during my interview and fought to bring me on board. "You've got a different way of thinking," he told me on my first day. "The other candidates gave me textbook answers. You gave me solutions I hadn't considered. That's rare. Don't lose that." I didn't plan to. For the first 3 years, things were good. I worked hard, learned fast, and started developing a reputation as someone who could solve problems others couldn't. Marcus made sure I got credit for my contributions. He advocated for my promotions, pushed for my raises, introduced me to executives at company events. Then Marcus had a heart attack. It happened on a Tuesday in March 2020, right as the pandemic was starting. He collapsed in the parking lot. Survived, thank God, but the doctors told him his 60-hour weeks were over. He took early retirement, and just like that, my protector was gone. His replacement arrived 2 weeks later. Her name was Victoria Ashford. Victoria was 42, Harvard MBA, had spent the previous decade climbing the corporate ladder at various tech companies with a trail of destroyed careers behind her. I didn't know that last part at first. I learned it later, after it was too late. She walked into our department on her first day, wearing a $3,000 suit and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've heard great things about this team," she said during her introduction. "I'm looking forward to taking us to the next level." I wanted to give her a chance. I really did. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks into her tenure. I had been working on an algorithm optimization that would significantly reduce processing time for our flagship product. Marcus had been excited about it before he left. I'd been developing it for 6 months. I presented my progress to Victoria in our first one-on-one meeting. She listened, nodded, took notes. Then she said, "This is interesting work, Sloane. Let me take this to the executive team and see if there's appetite for further development." "I'd love to present it myself," I said. "I've been working on it for." I appreciate the enthusiasm, but executive presentations require a certain finesse. Let me handle the politics. You focus on the technical work. That's where your strengths are. I should have pushed back. I should have insisted. But I was young and she was my boss, and I still believed the system worked. 2 weeks later, Victoria presented my algorithm to the executive team as her own work. She didn't mention my name once. I found out when the company newsletter announced that Victoria Ashford's innovative algorithm optimization had been approved for full development and would be integrated into our next product release. I went to her office. Calmly, professionally. "Victoria, I noticed the newsletter credited you with the algorithm work. I just wanted to clarify." "Sloane." She cut me off with that same cold smile. "In corporate environments, work belongs to the team. And as team leader, I represent our collective efforts. That's just how it works. I'm sure you understand. But I developed that algorithm independently, before you even joined, Are you questioning my leadership? Her voice went flat. Dangerous. Because I have to say, that's concerning. Marcus may have tolerated that kind of attitude, but I run a tighter ship. We're all on the same team here. Your success is my success. My recognition is your recognition. That's how corporate works. I left her office feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. But I didn't stop working. I didn't stop innovating. Because I still believed, stupidly, naively, that eventually the truth would come out. Eventually someone would notice. Over the next 2 years, it happened again and again. I developed a security protocol that prevented 3 potential data breaches. Victoria presented it to the board as her initiative. I created a user interface redesign that increased customer satisfaction scores by 34%. Victoria accepted an industry award for it. I identified a critical flaw in our cloud architecture that could have cost the company millions. Victoria wrote a white paper about it, with her name as the sole author. Every time I tried to speak up, she shut me down. Every time I went to HR, they told me that leadership representation of teamwork was standard practice. Every time I considered going over her head, I remembered that she had lunch with the CEO every Thursday, and I couldn't even get a meeting with his assistant. I started documenting everything. Emails, timestamps, version histories. I saved copies to my personal cloud. I didn't know what I would do with it all. I just knew that someday, somehow, I would need proof. Then came Project Phoenix. By late 2023, Vantage Technologies was in trouble. The pandemic boom had faded, competitors were catching up, and our flagship products were starting to feel dated. Revenue was down 40% from the previous year. Layoffs were happening every quarter. There were rumors that the board was considering selling the company, or worse, declaring bankruptcy. In October, the CEO announced an internal competition. Any team could submit proposals for new products or services that could save the company. The winning proposal would receive full funding, and the team lead would get a $5 million bonus plus a seat on the executive committee. Victoria called a department meeting the next day. "This is our opportunity," she said. "I want every one of you thinking about ideas. Big ideas. Revolutionary ideas. Bring me your best work, and together, we'll create something that saves this company. Together."
Right.
I went home that night and started working. But first, let me tell you about the night I almost quit. It was November 2022, about a year into Victoria's reign of terror. I had just watched her accept an award at the Austin Tech Innovation Summit, an award for a cybersecurity protocol I had designed entirely on my own. She stood on that stage in a red designer dress, holding a crystal trophy, thanking everyone except the person who had actually done the work. I went home, sat on my kitchen floor, and cried for 2 hours. My apartment was a small 1-bedroom in East Austin. Nothing fancy, just a place to sleep between the endless work hours. That night, surrounded by the glow of streetlights through thin curtains, I seriously considered walking away, moving back to Ohio where my parents lived, getting a normal job with normal hours where no one would steal my ideas because I wouldn't have any ideas worth stealing. I called my mom. "Sweetheart, you sound terrible. What's wrong?" I told her. Everything. The stolen credit, the gaslighting, the way Victoria made me feel like I was crazy for expecting basic recognition. My mom was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Sloane, when you were 7 years old, you entered a science fair with a project about weather patterns. You worked on it for 3 months. You were so proud. And then Brittany Hendricks, remember her? Copied your entire project the night before and told the judges you had copied her." I remember. I'd blocked it out, actually, but now it came flooding back. The humiliation. The tears. The unfairness of it all. You know what you did? You didn't quit. You didn't run away. You went back the next year with a project so detailed, so thorough, so obviously yours that no one could ever question it. You won first place, and Brittany never competed again. Mom, this is different. This is my career. This is exactly the same. Someone is trying to take what's yours. So don't let them. Document everything. Save everything. And when your moment comes, be ready. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time, thinking about 7-year-old me and that science fair. My mom was right. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to build a case so airtight, so undeniable, that when my moment came, no one would be able to question who deserved the credit. That night, I started keeping a detailed log. Every meeting, every conversation, every task I completed, and every piece of credit that was stolen. I bought a cheap voice recorder and started leaving it in my bag during one-on-ones with Victoria. I screenshotted emails before they could be deleted. I backed up my code to 3 different cloud services. I became meticulous, obsessive, paranoid, maybe, but I was building my arsenal. For the next 3 months, I barely slept. I worked my regular job during the day, the same grueling hours, the same thankless tasks, and then I worked on Project Phoenix at night and on weekends. What I created was a comprehensive artificial intelligence integration platform that would allow our enterprise clients to seamlessly incorporate AI capabilities into their existing systems. It wasn't just a product. It was an entire ecosystem: APIs, training modules, security protocols, scalability solutions. Everything a Fortune 500 company would need to enter the AI age without rebuilding their infrastructure from scratch. I called it Nexus. The name came to me at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in November when I was running on 4 hours of sleep and my 6th cup of coffee. Nexus. A connection point. The place where everything comes together. That's what I was building. A place where old systems and new technology could meet, where companies could step into the future without leaving their past behind. I worked at my tiny kitchen table, my laptop surrounded by empty takeout containers and scribbled notes. My cat, a gray tabby named Binary, would sit on the chair next to me, watching the code scroll across my screen like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. Some nights, I talked to her. What do you think, Binary? Should the API authentication use OAuth 2.0, or do we need something more robust? She'd blink at me slowly, which I took as agreement. Looking back, I think I was a little bit crazy during those months, but it was a productive kind of crazy. The kind that happens when you have something to prove and something to lose. I thought about Victoria constantly. Every time I hit a roadblock, I'd imagine her smug face at another award ceremony. Every time I solved a problem, I'd picture the moment when everyone would finally know the truth. That fury fueled me. It kept me going when my body wanted to quit, when my eyes burned from staring at screens, when my social life shriveled to nothing because I couldn't spare a single evening for anything but work. My friends stopped calling. My sister said I was obsessed and needed to move on. My mom, the only one who understood, would text me every morning. One day closer. Keep building. And I did. By December, I had a working prototype. By January, I had a full product specification, a market analysis, and a 3-year revenue projection. I documented everything. Every line of code, every design decision, every iteration. I saved timestamped backups to 3 different cloud services. I even emailed myself progress updates so there would be a paper trail. Because I knew what Victoria would do. In January 2024, I presented Nexus to Victoria in a private meeting. I had prepared a 40-slide presentation. I walked her through every component, every feature, every potential revenue stream. I showed her the market analysis, the competitor comparison, the projected ROI. She listened in silence. When I finished, she nodded slowly. This is impressive work, Sloane. Very impressive. Thank you. I'd like to present it directly to the executive committee. This is my project and I think. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. That smile again. I'll need to review this more thoroughly. Make sure it's ready for executive eyes. You know how demanding they can be. Victoria, I've spent 3 months on this. It's ready. I'll be the judge of that. Her voice hardened. Send me all your files. Everything. I want to make sure we're not missing anything. I hesitated. Is there a problem, Sloane?
No, I said.
No problem. I sent her the files. But I didn't send her the original timestamps. I didn't send her the email trail. I didn't send her the cloud backups. And I did one more thing. I downloaded an app to my phone. A recording app. one that could capture audio even when the screen was dark. I started recording every meeting, every one-on-one, every casual conversation in the hallway. It was probably illegal. In Texas, you need two-party consent for recordings. But I wasn't planning to use them in court. I was planning to use them for something else entirely. 3 weeks later, Victoria presented her AI integration platform to the executive committee. She called it Phoenix Rising. I watched the presentation from my desk, streaming on the internal company feed. Victoria stood in front of the board, clicking through slides I had created, explaining architecture I had designed, promising results I had calculated. She didn't mention my name once. The board loved it. The CEO called it visionary. The CFO said it could generate $200 million in new revenue within 3 years. And Victoria Ashford was announced as the winner of the competition. $5 million bonus. Executive committee seat. Her face on the cover of Austin Business Journal. I sat at my desk and watched it all happen, and I waited. The Friday after Victoria's triumph, I was called into her office. She wasn't alone. There was a woman from HR, Sandra something, I'd seen her around, and a security guard standing by the door. "Sloane, please sit down." Victoria's voice was silk over steel. "What's going on?" "I'm afraid we need to discuss your performance." "Sandra?" The HR woman opened a folder. "Sloane, we've received concerning reports about your work quality over the past several months. Missed deadlines, poor collaboration, resistance to feedback." "That's not true. I've exceeded every metric." "We've also had reports of insubordination," Sandra continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Questioning leadership decisions, creating a hostile work environment, undermining team morale." I looked at Victoria. She was smiling. "I'm afraid we have no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately," Sandra said. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings. You have 15 minutes. You can't do this." My voice was shaking, not with fear, with rage. I created that project. Phoenix Rising is my work. I have documentation. "Sloane." Victoria leaned forward. "You're embarrassing yourself. Phoenix Rising is the culmination of 18 months of my leadership. Whatever contributions you made were as part of my team, under my direction. That's how corporate works. I thought you understood that by now." She stood up. "You're fired, and honestly, it's a relief. I've been carrying your dead weight for 2 years." My phone was in my pocket. Recording. The security guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to go." I stood up. I looked at Victoria one last time. "You're going to regret this," I said quietly. She laughed. "Is that a threat?" "Sandra, make note of that, in case we need to pursue legal action." "It's not a threat," I said. "It's a prediction." They escorted me out of the building with my belongings in a cardboard box. I walked to my car in a daze. I sat behind the wheel for 20 minutes, just breathing. The parking lot was nearly empty. It was 5:47 p.m. on a Friday, and most people had already gone home for the weekend. I sat there watching the sun set over the Austin skyline, painting the clouds orange and pink, and I tried to process what had just happened. 2 years of work. 3 months of nights without sleep. Hundreds of hours of code and design and planning.
Gone. Stolen.
Accredited to someone else. And now I was sitting in my car with a cardboard box containing a photo of my family, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest engineer," and the shattered remains of my career. I called my mom. She didn't answer. I called my sister. She said, "I told you so. I told you that job was toxic. You should have listened." I hung up on her. For about 10 minutes, I genuinely considered driving to the nearest bar and drinking myself into oblivion. I could wallow. I could rage. I could spend the weekend feeling sorry for myself and figuring out how to start over in a new city where no one knew my name. But then I thought about my documentation. The timestamps. The emails. The recordings. I hadn't spent 2 years building an arsenal just to surrender now. I wiped my eyes, started my car, and went home. There was work to do. Then I went home and started making phone calls. The first call was to an old colleague from Marcus's era, a woman named Janet, who now worked at a competitor. She'd heard about Victoria's reputation and wasn't surprised by what happened to me. "There's a board meeting on Monday," she told me. "Quarterly review. All the investors will be there. Victoria's supposed to present her implementation timeline for Phoenix Rising." "How do you know that?" "My husband works in Vantage's finance department. They don't tell each other everything, but they tell each other enough." The second call was to a lawyer. Not for the recording, I knew that would be inadmissible, but for everything else. The emails, the timestamps, the cloud backups, the version histories that proved I had created Nexus 3 months before Victoria ever saw it. "This is clear intellectual property theft," the lawyer said. "But going to court could take years. Is that what you want?" "No," I said. "I want something faster." The third call was the most important. I called Edward Harrington. Edward was the chairman of Vantage's board of directors. He was 68 years old, a self-made billionaire who had started his first company in a garage in 1978 and built it into a tech empire. He'd sold that company in 2010 and now spent his time investing in startups and serving on boards. He had also been a close friend of Marcus Webb. I'd met Edward once at a company Christmas party 3 years earlier. Marcus had introduced us. Edward had asked me about my work, listened carefully to my answers, and told me I had the spark. I didn't know if he'd remember me, but I had to try. His assistant answered. I left a message. I didn't expect a call back. He called back in 2 hours. "Sloane Whitaker," he said. "Marcus's protege. I heard about your termination. I also heard about Phoenix Rising. Mr. Harrington, I need to tell you something about that project." "I'm listening." I told him everything. The 2 years of stolen credit. The documentation I'd saved. The timestamps that proved I had created Nexus in October and November, months before Victoria ever saw it. The recording of my termination meeting, which I couldn't use legally, but which I could play for him privately. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Can you prove all of this?" he asked. "Every word." "Then I think you should come to the board meeting on Monday. I'll make sure you're on the guest list." "Mr. Harrington, I was just fired. They won't let me in the building." "Miss Whitaker, I'm the chairman of the board. They'll let in whoever I damn well please."
He paused.
"Be there at 9 a.m. and bring everything you have." Monday morning, 8:45 a.m. I stood outside the Vantage Technologies headquarters in a blazer I'd bought the day before, the nicest thing I'd ever owned. My laptop bag contained a folder of printed documentation and a USB drive with every piece of evidence I'd gathered. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. At 8:55, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're on the list. Conference room 3A. Good luck. Yeech." I walked through the front door. The security guard at the desk looked up, checked his list, and frowned. "Sloane Whitaker?" "That's me." "You're scheduled for the board meeting?" "That's correct." He looked confused, but he handed me a visitor badge. "Conference room 3A. Elevators are to your left." I rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was empty. Everyone who mattered was already in the meeting. I could hear voices through the conference room door. Victoria's voice, smooth and confident, walking the board through her implementation timeline. I pushed open the door. The room went silent. 20 people sat around a massive conference table. The CEO, the CFO, the entire executive committee. 7 board members, including Edward Harrington at the head of the table, and Victoria Ashford, standing at the front of the room with a clicker in her hand, frozen mid-gesture. "What the hell?" The CEO, a man named Richard Vance, stood up. "Security, this woman was terminated on Friday. She shouldn't be in the building." "She's here at my invitation," Edward Harrington said calmly. Richard turned to him. "Edward, what is this about?" "Sit down, Richard. Miss Whitaker has something to show us."
He looked at me.
"Don't you, Miss Whitaker?" I walked to the front of the room. My legs felt like they were made of water, but I kept moving. Victoria stepped aside, her face pale, her eyes wide. For a moment, Just a brief moment. I saw fear in those eyes. Real fear. The kind that comes when you suddenly realize your carefully constructed lies are about to collapse. I held on to that image. It would fuel me through what came next. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. My voice was steadier than I expected. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe the board needs to see some information before you approve the Phoenix Rising implementation. I plugged my USB drive into the conference room's presentation system. The screen flickered to life. The Vantage Technologies logo appeared, followed by my first slide. Project Nexus, the truth about Phoenix Rising. Victoria made a small sound, almost like a gasp. As you know, Victoria Ashford presented Phoenix Rising, an AI integration platform, last month. The board approved a $30 million development budget and awarded Ms. Ashford a $5 million bonus for her work. I clicked to my first slide. This is a timestamp from my personal cloud storage showing that I created a project called Nexus on October 3, 2023, 4 months before Ms. Ashford's presentation. The slide showed a screenshot of my cloud folder with the date clearly visible. This is a lie, Victoria said. She's a disgruntled employee. Please let her finish, Victoria. Edward's voice was ice. I clicked to the next slide. This is an email I sent to myself on October 17, 2023, containing the first draft of the Nexus system architecture. It's identical to the architecture Ms. Ashford presented as Phoenix Rising. Another slide. This is a version history from my code repository, showing 847 commits between October and January, all time-stamped and all under my user credentials. I paused to let that sink in. 847 commits. Hundreds of hours of work. All documented. All traceable. Another. This is a technical design document I created on October 12th, outlining the core architecture of Nexus. Here is the same document as it appeared in Ms. Ashford's Phoenix Rising presentation, word for word identical, except my name has been removed from the author field. I could hear murmuring around the table. Board members leaning in to look at the screen, comparing the two documents. Another. Here are internal Slack messages from November, where I discussed Nexus development challenges with colleagues. Ms. Ashford was not part of these conversations. She had no involvement in solving these technical problems. Yet somehow, her presentation contains the exact solutions we developed. Victoria's face had gone from pale to gray. She looked like she might be sick. Another. This is the presentation I gave to Ms. Ashford on January 8, 2024, walking her through the Nexus project and asking her permission to present it to the executive committee. She told me she would review it and decide if it was ready. I looked at Victoria. She was gripping the edge of the conference table, her knuckles white. 3 weeks later, Ms. Ashford presented my work as her own. She didn't change the architecture. She didn't change the code structure. She didn't even change most of the slide content. She just changed the name from Nexus to Phoenix Rising and put her name on it. I clicked to my final slide, and when I tried to object, she had me fired. Here is the recording of that termination meeting. I pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room. You're fired, and honestly, it's a relief. I've been carrying your dead weight for 2 years. Then my voice. I created that project. Phoenix Rising is my work. I have documentation. And Victoria again. Whatever contributions you made were as part of my team under my direction. That's how corporate works. I stopped the recording. The room was absolutely silent. Richard Vance was staring at Victoria with an expression I couldn't read. The CFO had his head in his hands. The board members were exchanging glances. This is inadmissible, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Texas is a two-party consent state. She recorded me without permission. This is illegal. This isn't a courtroom, Victoria. Edward Harrington stood up slowly. This is a board meeting. And what I've just seen is evidence that you committed intellectual property theft, fraud, and gross misconduct. You stole this woman's work, took credit for it, collected a $5 million bonus under false pretenses, and then terminated her to cover your tracks. He looked at Richard. Richard, call security. Richard hesitated for half a second, then picked up the phone on the conference table. Send security to conference room 3A. Immediately. Victoria's face went white. You can't do this. I'm an executive. I have a contract. Your contract contains a clause about termination for cause, Edward said. I think fraud and theft qualify. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. The door opened. 2 security guards stepped in. Victoria looked around the room, at the executives who wouldn't meet her eyes, at the board members who had celebrated her just weeks ago, at me, standing at the front of the room with my evidence on the screen behind me. This isn't over, she said to me. I'll sue you for that recording. I'll destroy you. You already tried to destroy me, I said. It didn't work. The security guards escorted her out. The door closed behind her. For a moment, the room was completely silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then Edward Harrington started to clap. One person at first. Then the CFO joined in. Then the other board members. Then, reluctantly, even Richard Vance. I stood there at the front of the room, my evidence still on the screen behind me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Vindication. Not joy. Not triumph. Just vindication. The quiet, bone-deep satisfaction of finally being seen. Of finally being believed. Miss Whitaker. Edward walked toward me. I owe you an apology on behalf of this company. What happened to you should never have happened. Victoria Ashford was hired under my recommendation, and clearly, my judgment was flawed. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I also owe you a personal apology. Marcus Webb told me years ago that you were exceptional, that you were the future of this company. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have seen what was happening. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded.
Now.
He turned to the rest of the room. I believe we have a project to implement, and I believe we have the wrong person assigned to lead it.
He looked at me.
Miss Whitaker, would you be interested in returning to Vantage Technologies? Not as a senior engineer, as the director of AI integration. With full authority over the Nexus project, I believe that's what you called it, and a compensation package that reflects your actual contributions to this company. I stared at him. The position comes with a salary of $400,000 annually, plus equity options, plus the $5 million bonus that should have been yours in the first place. I couldn't speak. I actually couldn't form words. I'll take that as a yes. Edward smiled. Richard, I trust you'll handle the paperwork. And I trust there won't be any further issues with Miss Whitaker's employment. Am I clear? Richard nodded quickly. Crystal clear. Edward turned back to me. Welcome back to Vantage Technologies, Miss Whitaker. Now, why don't you walk us through the real Phoenix Rising? I believe you called it Nexus? I took a deep breath. I clicked back to my first slide, and I began to present my work to a room that was finally ready to listen. 6 months later, Nexus launched to 3 pilot clients. Within a year, it had generated $47 million in new revenue. The company's stock price doubled. The bankruptcy rumors disappeared. I was promoted to Vice President of Product Innovation. My team grew from 0 to 35 engineers, all of whom knew exactly who had created the technology they were building on. The day of my promotion, I walked into my new corner office, glass walls, view of the Austin skyline, a desk bigger than my first apartment, and I just stood there for a while, taking it in. My mom flew down for the occasion. She walked into that office, looked around, and started crying. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. So proud. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. That phone call when you reminded me about the science fair, that's what kept me going. She hugged me tight. You did this yourself, Sloane. All I did was remind you who you already were. There's a framed photo on my desk now. It's from a science fair when I was 8, the year after Brittany Hendricks stole my project. I'm standing next to my weather station display, holding a blue first-place ribbon, grinning like I'd just won the lottery. I keep it there to remind myself that I've been fighting this battle my whole life. And I've been winning. Victoria Ashford was sued by the company for fraud and breach of contract. She was forced to return her $5 million bonus, plus damages. Her LinkedIn profile went dark. Her professional network evaporated. The industry that had celebrated her just months earlier wanted nothing to do with her. Last I heard, she was working at a small consulting firm in Nebraska, her reputation in the tech industry completely destroyed. I don't feel sorry for her. I probably should, but I don't. A few months after everything happened, I got a letter. No return address. Handwritten envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. No signature, but I knew who it was from. I thought about responding. I thought about explaining that she had ruined her own life the moment she decided to steal from someone who was keeping records. I thought about telling her that karma isn't random, it's earned. But I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Instead, I threw the letter away and went back to work. Some people might say I was lucky. That if Edward Harrington hadn't remembered me, if Janet hadn't told me about the board meeting, if Marcus hadn't introduced us at that Christmas party 4 years earlier, none of this would have happened. Maybe that's true. But luck isn't random. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I spent 2 years documenting everything. I saved every email, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. I recorded conversations I wasn't supposed to record. I built a case, piece by piece, even when I didn't know what I would do with it. That wasn't luck. That was survival. And when the opportunity finally came, when Edward Harrington answered my call and gave me 15 minutes in front of the board, I was ready. I've thought a lot about what I would say to younger Sloane, the one who walked into Victoria's office that first time, eager to share her algorithm work, naive enough to believe credit would follow merit. I'd tell her to document everything from day one, not because she expects to be betrayed, but because she might be. I'd tell her to build relationships with people at every level of the company. The Edward Harringtons of the world, the people with power and integrity, they exist. Find them. Earn their respect. You never know when you'll need an ally. I'd tell her that standing up for herself isn't insubordination. It's survival. The people who call you difficult for wanting credit for your work are the same people who'll take everything from you if you let them. And I'd tell her to keep that fire burning. The anger, the frustration, the burning need to prove everyone wrong. That's not weakness. That's fuel. Use it. If you're watching this, if you're in a job where someone is stealing your work, your credit, your future, I want you to know something. Document everything. Save everything. Build your case, even if you don't know when you'll use it. Because the people who take from you, they think you won't fight back. They think you're too scared, too powerless, too beaten down to stand up for yourself. Prove them wrong. Victoria Ashford looked at me and saw dead weight. She saw someone she could use and discard. She saw a victim. She didn't see me at all. And that was her mistake. The recording I played in that board meeting lasted 47 seconds. But it took 2 years to make it matter. 2 years of stolen credit, swallowed pride, and silent documentation. 2 years of waiting for my moment. And when that moment came, I didn't hesitate. I didn't beg. I didn't negotiate. I didn't ask for permission. I walked into that room, and I took back everything that was mine. That's not revenge. That's justice. And if you're still watching, if you're still stuck in a job where someone is taking credit for your work, I want you to remember something. Your time will come. It might take months. It might take years. But if you document everything, if you build your case, if you wait for the right moment and strike when they least expect it, your time will come. Mine did. And nobody can ever take it away from me again.